I literally just walked outside. It was 4:30 in the morning, and I just yelled at God, "We know it's coming. Just take him out of his suffering." Dad's prayer the whole time was, "Yes, we want big miracle, miraculous physical healing." The bigger prayer is that our journey, our story, the way that we live, that God would work in other people's lives to soften their hearts, to allow our story to lead them to Jesus. Do you see Jesus?
Welcome back to Built by Faith. And I'm joined by my good friend, Caleb Poston here. And we're going to get right into it, Caleb. July 19th of last year. Yeah, I know. I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened that changed your life, tested your faith, and everything in between. And I want to start there because I feel like it's the most important thing. And you can take it back as far as you want, but go back to that date and tell me about the things that led up to it and what happened in your life.
For sure. So July 19th of last year, my dad passed after a 19-month battle with colon cancer. It was the hardest day of my life, the hardest day of my family's life. But the amazing thing is, in that moment, I have never been more at peace ever in my life. I can't explain it other than God. Literally, my dad took his last breath and I lost it for 2, 3 seconds. And then I just immediately stopped and my shoulders dropped and I just felt good. And then I lost it again. But that feeling is one I'll never forget. One I'll never truly be able to explain. But yeah, that day it was tough. Like I said, it was a 19-month journey. If you go back to February of 2023, my dad's dad, my grandpa, he passed away about a week and a half after my birthday. And then you fast forward through the year and we're getting to the holidays, and my dad's starting to have a little health issues, been real lethargic, and just the typical, like, me and my sister had a conversation of like, we're gonna have to talk with him, like he needs to change something. Like the typical, like, dad comes home, chills on the couch, and mom's like, dude, can you like help me, can you do this, can you do that? And we're like, like he's just got to change some habits. Like we want him to live a long life. My sister had a just over 1 year old at that point, and I was had gotten engaged and was getting married August of 24. And so we were like, we want to be able to live life and celebrate these things with him, and we know that it's weighing on mom, and so like let's help her. And they came over for Thanksgiving. They lived in Indianapolis, and my mom had to rush my dad back home. He was having some issues. They went to the hospital, and he had a bowel obstruction, and so they dealt with that. Got him in a good enough place, and we were able to celebrate holidays, all that kind of stuff. And then they did some more tests, and they went in, placed a stent, cleared it out, and then did some testing on that. And at this point, I don't remember if that was a little before Christmas, a little after Christmas. I think it was beginning of 2024, but they did that, and we just had this gut feeling of it's cancer. And so we didn't go in like thinking the worst, but we were prepared to hear that word. And so I went over to Indianapolis and sat with my mom when my dad went in for them to remove the stent, do the pulling out of some of the tumor, and test it and whatnot. And we get the results a few days, week later, something like that. And they came back and said colon cancer. And at the time, they said as run of the mill colon cancers can be, and that we would get on a plan and that would be that. And so he starts to meet with his oncologist, and this is February of 2024 at this point. His birthday's February, beginning of February, 2 weeks before mine. And so a rough way to start his 55th birthday and 55th year. And but we were going into it positive, and they came back with the plan of he's going to have chemo for 6 months every 2 weeks. And so he's going to have 12 rounds. It was going to be very flexible. We had a family trip with a bunch of good family friends to Disney that summer. He was going to be able to adjust things to where he wasn't going to have to be on chemo during those weeks. And then he, as it gets to my wedding in August of 24, he can stop before he gets too close to the wedding, so he's not exhausted for that, and then he can pick back up afterwards. And so we get to my wedding, and my dad performed my wedding. My dad was a pastor my entire life, and that was one of the things when me and my wife got engaged and we started to plan the wedding. I said, really, the only thing that I have to have is my dad do my wedding. He did my sister's. He had done probably 25, 30 some odd weddings of kids that grew up in his youth group and people that we had gone to church together. I'd been to so many of those. And so for all these years, I had seen these weddings and I just envisioned how mine was going to go. And I knew all the things he said and just the personal touches that he added. And so I was like, all right, big guy, like you got to make it to August. And so we get to August and he did great. And we were able to dance the night away afterwards and have fun and all that good stuff. And in September, he went for his final round of chemo, and I went with him and my mom, and still have a video on my phone. He rang the bell. We celebrated, and life was good. And late October, started experiencing some different symptoms. He was having some swelling in his stomach and some other things. And so he went back and he was having fluid buildup around his stomach, and they were draining at the start of this like 4 or 5 liters at a time. And it would build up relatively quickly, like within 2 weeks or so. And so we're going through this, and then get to the holidays right before Christmas. I think it was right after Thanksgiving. And my mom texted me, my sister, and said, hey, I need you guys to come over and sit with me tomorrow. Dad's having a procedure. So we go over and we get there, and mom said, I had to get you here without raising any flags. Dad's not having a procedure, but we have news to tell you. And the cancer was back. When they originally diagnosed him, they knew that it had made it through the colon wall, but it hadn't really spread. And there was no evidence of it anywhere else other than a few lymph nodes that they had removed. And so we thought all was good. And what we didn't know was that it was so microscopic at that point that it was out, but it wasn't detected. And so he developed peritoneal cancer, which, for those that don't know, your peritoneum basically encases your stomach and all that kind of stuff. And so it was just in that sack of organs. And so he had to figure out, all right, what's our next step? And we got to the beginning of 2025, and he was probably for a month or so in the hospital more than he was out. And at that point, I was prepared for him to not be there for my birthday. And we had gone into Christmas like hoping and praying that this wasn't our last Christmas, but know that it very well might be, because peritoneal cancer, they can't give you a timeline. Everybody's body reacts to it different. We came to find out that a family friend we've known for years, he had been dealing with it for 7 years. Some people can last that long. Some people are a couple weeks. And so they were like, there's really no timeline. And so that kind of really hit my whole family of like, we have this timeline, but we don't. And so we have to be intentional and make the most of every moment we have. And it's easy to do that when somebody says you got 2 months, but when somebody says you've got who knows how long, it's like, okay, I want to be intentional, but it's also still kind of that every day of like, maybe we've got 7 years, like maybe this isn't like as a big deal or whatever. And, but at the beginning of 2025, I was mentally prepared. Like he was in a really rough place. He had lost a lot of weight and he just didn't look great. We had some family pictures taken, and ironically enough, you look at those pictures from beginning of 2025, two family pictures we had taken in June of 2025, just over a month before he passed. And he looked healthier in June than he did in January. And so we go through this. We finally get to a stable point. He's out of the hospital, and he actually came over to UC, and I went with him to meet with a doctor about a potential procedure that was basically just going to machine wash cycle just chemo into his peritoneum, clean it out, and it's just holds it at bay. And they had to test a couple of things to make sure that he was able to do that. And at this point, all we had been told that his chemo had been working, that everything was being held at bay from what we originally been told. Like it had actually kind of shrunk a little bit. But when they did the testing and everything for this procedure, they came back and said that it had infiltrated part of his liver, which at that point you can't do anything. And so now it's really we've got a timeline of probably 2 months, maybe 2 to 6. And they gave the option of doing another chemo. And my dad weighed like what is going to be the symptoms, quality of life versus not doing it, and what is going to be for the trial that it was like, are they going to be able to get stuff out of it to be helpful? And he ended up deciding that it was best to just say we're done and we're just going to go and we're going to live life and we're going to make the most of what we have left. And so we go through that, and we like I said, we had that 2 to 6 month timeline, and we knew that it was probably closer to the 2 months. And so as we got closer to that day, it hit and it became a reality, but it also became a sense of peace. Like I said, my dad was a pastor, and I saw him preach in February at our old church that he was a preacher at for 17 years in Louisville. And ironically enough, I don't know if they planned it like this or it just happened to be, but they were celebrating Cancer Day that day. And my dad's the one that's preaching. And they do 3 services. And this was coming out of his pretty rough stretch. And so my mom was really worried that he wasn't going to make it and that they were going to have to put a video recording up. And by God's grace, he made it through all three services, voice strong. We went to lunch afterwards with good family friends. And my mom had to like keep nudging him, like, hey, you need to stop talking so much. Like, you need to save some of your energy. And then you get to April, I think it was, somewhere around there. And he's a part of a sermon at the church that he was working at the time in Indianapolis. And their senior pastor just kind of did like an interview type of thing, just asking my dad some questions. And my dad had told me this previously, but watching him say it from a stage, get emotional about it, and tell his story to their congregation really hit me. And it was some point in January after church, he was out running some errands and he was having a pretty good day. And he just sat in the car and just had a worship song that came on. And it made him sit there. And he said that I came out of that 5-10 minutes just crying out to God, like everything that I was ever worried about, everything that I ever had a doubt about, all of that was gone. I knew 100%, no doubt about it, when my time on earth is over, exactly what is happening. And which we knew that, but as humans, like that's part of it. Like you gotta have faith. Like you don't know. And he came out of hearing that song and that moment with God of like, I have no doubt. Like this weight is off my back. I'm good. I'm at peace, and I'm just gonna live life. And when my time comes, my time comes. And so, as we were going through this and getting closer and closer, people would ask me how I'm doing, and I'm like, he's literally fighting for his life at 100% peace. How can I not be at peace? And that didn't mean that I wasn't sad. I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't thinking all those things, but I was at peace. Like I knew what was going to happen and that this wasn't it. And so we get to family vacation in June, and we had so many family friends that blessed us with that. And we will never be able to say truly how much that trip meant. And people paying for us to have a golf cart so that my dad could get around easily, and providing their beach house for us to go on the trip, and getting a text from good family friends while we're there. Hey, we want you guys to have family pictures. We've set up a photographer. Tell us what day, and she's going to meet you at the beach. And so that was just another example of tangibly how God was providing for us and just giving us comfort and peace like through this journey. He did that so many times. My parents were in the hospital back before that, and the chaplain walks in and he said his name, and my mom looked at my dad and said, Steve, do you know who that is? My dad was like, no. And my mom said, that's so-and-so. It was a missionary friend that we had had for 25 plus years, and they hadn't seen him in probably 15 years or more. And he was the chaplain at the hospital. It was like only a God thing. And so just all those reminders through the journey just made something that was so hard just a little bit easier. And like I said, me and my dad had a really good conversation on our vacation. We were just standing in the driveway of the beach house, and it was probably 30 minutes. Like we both cried, and he said some things, and he said that he's sorry that I have to go through this, and that um, he's like, people think that it's like bad for me and that like this situation stinks and whatever. He's like, but honestly, he's like, I got it easy. Like when it's all over, like I don't have to deal with it anymore. You guys are the ones that have to deal with this big hole, keep going through all this, um, and figure it out. And um, so that was a hard, but a really good and really meaningful conversation. And flash forward to um, July, and I'd gone on a trip for work, and I come back, and my mom texts me and says, "Call me when you can." I get in the car, and she said, "Dad's a little worried. This might be it. So come straight to Kate's. Don't go home." So I drive to my sister's house because my parents were in town for my nephew's uh, third birthday party, I think it was. And so I drive straight to my sister's. My dad's in my sister and brother-in-law's bed, and my sister, brother-in-law, nephews, and mom are in there. Me and my wife walk in, and by the time we get there, he's doing a little bit better. And we got there probably around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we sat around till midnight just talking. And my mom finally looked at us and said, "All right, you guys got to get out because I got to take care of him. And if I don't go to bed, I can't take care of him." And so we knew at that point that he was okay, that that wasn't it. But me and my sister came out of that, and it was a couple days later, and she was like, like that night was so easy. Like we just sat around, talked like nothing was different because there's nothing left unsaid between us. Like we know how he feels, he knows how we feel. And our faith is just so strong that we know that when all's said and done, um, that he's going to be okay. And so we go to my parents the week that he passed, actually the weekend before. Um, and it was, again, the whole family, my parents, and we're just hanging out. And me and my wife come back Sunday night so that I could be back at work. But the crazy part about this whole thing is, like I told you before we started, I got out of college coaching June of 2024. If you do the math, the dad's going through it at this point. And I had bounced around to every corner of America at that point. And God gave me an opportunity that I didn't pursue to come back home and to be able to spend time with my family and work directly for our CEO, and him be so understanding of like, hey, like what I'm going through. And when you need a day, like tell me and go spend time with your parents, go to that doctor's appointment, whatever. And you go through 2024, get to 2025, and I'm about to walk out of the office on a Wednesday afternoon. And he pulls me aside and said, "We need to talk." And I'm like, a little worried. He said, "Well, what do you think about this?" And it was a position that had just opened up because somebody left. And it was a completely different area of our company, but an area that I had helped with a little bit as they needed help. He said, "It's easier for me to replace you in your position now than it is to replace that position. And you know how that position works. So I'm going to move you to that position and hire somebody to replace you." The kicker is that position was 4 10s. So I got Fridays off. So that now gave me more time to go to my parents, spend time with my dad, help my mom do what she needed to do. And at this point, whenever everything happens, I can be there to help mom. I can just be there as a comforter. I can just have that time. And so I was able to spend extra time with them, even though it was just a few weeks. Like that just gave me a couple extra days. And then we go home that Sunday. My sister's a teacher, so it was summer. She didn't have to work. So her and my youngest nephew, they ended up staying till Wednesday. And we get a text from my mom Thursday, and she's like, I don't know, he's kind of bad today. Just be prepared. I might need you guys to come. And this is probably around 1 o'clock, and around 3:30. I texted my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm about to leave work. You don't need to leave now, but as soon as you can get off work, um, we already had our bags packed. We're throwing the bag in the car and we're going to mom and dad's." And so about 4 o'clock, we hit the road. We get to my parents, and my dad was in his corner of the couch, and he was a completely different person from Sunday to Thursday. When we left Sunday, it was conversation, it was laughing, it was watching TV. I'll see you next weekend. Love you, buddy. All that kind of stuff. We get there Thursday, and conversation is possible, but it's more us talking to him, him comprehending us, and us getting the very short uh-huhs, head shakes, that kind of stuff. My sister got there about an hour later, and she looked at me and said, he's completely different from just 24 hours ago. And so we knew at that point that we were getting to it. And so we go through that day. Like I said, it's Thursday. We get Dad in bed, and at this point, he doesn't have the strength to sit up, but he still got the cough, and he's so used to every time he coughs, he sits up. And so, just out of muscle memory, he's sitting himself up, and every time he coughs and all that kind of stuff. And so we were on alert at night to help mom if she needed. Um, but then come Friday night, um, we got him in bed and we said, it's all hands on deck. We're taking shifts. And my youngest nephew um, was not quite a year old. And so he was still waking up in the night to eat and all that kind of stuff. And so my sister and brother-in-law took the first shift. Actually, no, me and my wife took the first shift. And then my sister and brother-in-law were going to take the second shift when they woke up to feed him and all that kind of stuff. And by the time it came time to switch shifts at about 2:30 in the morning, there was no shifts. It's we're all in here. And Dad was like, I got to sit myself up. I got to swing myself over the bed, all that kind of stuff. And we just kept having to tell him it's not safe for you to do that. Like, you can fall out of bed. And so it was a real struggle that night. At that point, he had what the doctor called the death rattle, where every time he was breathing, we hear this rattling in his lungs. They're like, it's worse for the people that hear it than the people that are going through it, because it didn't hurt him at all. But to us, it sounds like he's just suffering with every breath he takes. And so we were listening to this all night. And at one point, I literally just walked outside. It was 4:30 in the morning, and I just stared up at the sky and I just yelled at God, and I said, we know it's coming. Just take him. Take him out of his suffering. Because at that point, I knew where he was going, and I didn't want him to suffer anymore. And I go back in and kind of got myself together, and it got to the morning of, I don't know, 7:30 ish, and my mom was like, "All right, you guys need to get a little bit of sleep." And so my sister's laying on the bed with my mom and my dad. Me and my wife and my brother-in-law are laying on the floor, and my mom, I hear my dad start to cough a little bit, and he'd, like I said, been coughing all night, so I didn't think anything of it, like my mom and sister helping him. And then all of a sudden, my mom says, "Caleb, get up here." So I'm laying on the floor at the foot of the bed, and I get up, get to the side, and I didn't see this. And some ways I view it as a blessing, in some ways I really wish I would have seen it. But I just hear my mom say, "Do you see Jesus?" Because my dad opened his eyes real big, and just stared up. And she tells me to get up there. And after she asked him that question, he reached his hands up towards the sky, brought him down. And then at that point, takes 2 or 3 more breaths, and he was in the arms of Jesus. And that brings us to the moment where I just lost it. And then just that overwhelming sense of peace. And then I cried again, and then I prayed for my family. And since that moment, it's been dealing with all of the battles and struggles of doing life without him. For my mom, for my sister, for me, for my wife, my brother-in-law. Like at that point, we're just about a month shy from our first year wedding anniversary. And so now I'm dealing with the learning curve of being newly married, making my wife my priority, dealing with losing my dad, and now having to be there for my mom who's 2 hours away. And so just having to go through that for almost the past year it's been tough. Me and my wife have told plenty of people we would never wish our first year of marriage on anybody. She started a new career. I started a new career. She went back to school. Um, dealt with my dad. But we know that if we can get through that, we can get through anything. And there's been so many times that I've missed him and really wanted him to be here. I really wanted to ask him for advice. But when I get mad, upset, whatever, I just think, I don't want him to be here. Not because I don't miss him, but because he is perfect. He is whole. And he is somewhere that is so much better than this messed up world that we're living in. And I would never want to take that from him. And so that's been really like a challenge for me, like in those moments and testing my faith and just like reminding me like where we are and where we're going. And but there's so many other things through the journey. Like we prayed the entire time for big miracles. Yes, we want.
Talk to me about that, because prayer, like what
Mm-hmm.
was the prayer yours and your family like during this time?
At that point, like I said, I've been a preacher's kid my whole life. I was born on a Wednesday and I was in church on Sunday. I was 3 days old. So prayer's been a part of my life since I was a little kid, at meals, going to bed, all that kind of stuff. But in that stretch, my prayer life has never been, and since then hasn't, unfortunately, been as disciplined, as strong, as bold. But our prayer was that God would do big things. We wanted a miraculous healing. And while we wanted that, Dad's prayer the whole time was, yes, we want big miracle, miraculous physical healing. But the bigger prayer is that our journey, our story, the way that we live, that God would work in other people's lives to soften their hearts, to allow our story to lead them to Jesus. And as we prayed that, there were definitely times where it was hard for me to honestly pray that and think like, this is the bigger prayer than the physical healing. But there were definitely moments where, without a doubt, that was every single person in my family's heart, was that our story would lead people to Jesus, because that's what my dad lived for. Like that was his entire life's calling. Um, and so through that journey, like even before he passed, we heard some stories of how our family and how my dad's journey had um, helped them grow their faith. And we found out afterwards that there were some people that at the church that he worked at, that he led their um, men's basketball league. And there were a couple guys there that ended up getting baptized at their church because of, not that my dad did anything, pushed anything, but just being there hanging out. He just had conversations with them, asked them how life was doing, and it just influenced them and softened their heart and led to conversations that ended up leading to them giving their life to Jesus. And so it's been so cool to see those stories, hear those stories of how my dad impacted other people's lives, even through his toughest days, and that when he was going through the ringer, um, that he was still shining God's light, and that he was leading people to Jesus, and that he wasn't letting that get him down and let him veer off from what God had called him to do. And so we prayed every day. And when he passed, I don't remember my exact prayer, but it was just a big praise, a big thank you um, to God for what he had given us, the relationship that we had had, the way that my dad had loved us, provided for us, um, made all those memories, and then just a prayer for strength and peace. And man, peace is, there's been hard days for all of us, but peace is something that I've never felt more than I have from that moment till now. Um, and I felt peace and strength through the entire journey. I think maybe once did I tell any of the story um, before Dad passed and got any kind of emotional. I went up on stage, and me and my sister both spoke at his celebration of life. And afterwards, people were like, I don't know how you did it, how you were that strong. And as I told my family beforehand and told them afterwards, it wasn't me, it was God. I'm a pretty emotional person. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And at one point in my life, that was something that I was ashamed of or tried to hide. But the older I got, I was like, I don't care. And so that became one of those in that moment that I just trusted God that he was going to provide the strength that I needed. He'd provided it for 19 months, and he was going to do it for another 5 to 10 minutes. And so I got up on that stage and um, said what I had to say and walked off that stage with maybe one tear rolling down my cheek. And I just knew that it was nothing but God, because there's no way.
You said you're an emotional person, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing now. But I want to know if during this process you ever got angry at God and what that looked like.
Yeah, I think uh, I don't remember exactly what phone call it was with my parents, but I know that it was me and my wife, my mom and my sister and brother-in-law, and my mom and dad, all at our houses on FaceTime, and they gave us some news, told us a few things, and we talked for a little bit, and I got off, and I know exactly where in our living room I was laying on the floor, and I just lost it, and I just started screaming, and screaming at God, screaming to my wife that this was stupid, it was unfair, he didn't deserve it, all that kind of stuff. Um, there were definitely those moments where I questioned God. I asked him, like, why somebody that has lived such a good life and lived to share you and to lead people to you, why does somebody like that need to go through this? And as the story unfolded and as the journey happened, it's because it just made his story that much more powerful, and it was able to lead more people to Jesus because the platform that he had, the life that he had lived, um, now that he was going through that, it's the real test. And he never wavered. It only got stronger. And so it was just able to be that much more of a testimony to God, um, and to my dad's faith, and to what we read in the Bible and what we're praying for, hoping for, and have faith in every single day.
Because when you were talking about it, you went out at 4:30 in the morning and you cried out to God, and then you have this
Mm-hmm.
anger and frustration moment. And what I hear is that you brought all of it to him. How do you manage that and know that it's okay and not feel like you're being disobedient, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, I think that's one of those where I go back to one of the things that my dad said in that sermon where he kind of interviewed with his senior pastor, and he had asked him how his prayer life was, what his prayer was, how his faith was, all that kind of stuff. And my dad talked about like how in our faith, like that's truly what it is. Like we have to have faith, but it's okay to have doubt because we are like that's part of the faith. And so in that, like it's okay to question God because we don't understand him, and if we did, we would be him. And so it's just the faith through that struggle, through that questioning, uh, that we just have to stay strong. And that's something that, especially over the past couple months, that's really been on my heart and a challenge, that kind of takes me back to that is like I've been saying, like I need to pray more specifically, more boldly, not be scared to ask God. Like even if it seems like something that's small and embarrassing, like I hope my car doesn't break down in the next couple months and that I don't have to buy a new car or something like that. Like it seems small and silly, but God wants us to be specific and bold and bring our worries to him. And so that takes me to the questioning part of like, if God wants me to be bold in my prayers and asking him to do those things or provide these things, like God wants me to be honest in my thoughts and my questions. And he knows what my question is and what my thoughts are, but um, bringing it to him just shows that faith and that trust. And it's just like you and me having a conversation. Like I question, and I might not get an immediate response or immediate answer, but at some point in his timing, he's going to give that. And it just happened to be a little short of 4 hours later that he answered that question for me and answered that prayer, and um, proved, while it doesn't make sense to our earthly minds, he proved to be faithful because we were praying for miraculous healing. And while it wasn't the one we wanted, it was the best one that my dad could have got.
It was the ultimate healing.
For sure.
I wrote down there's nothing left unsaid. And where I'm drawn to is that's what God wants with us.
Agreed. Yeah, it's one of those that through um, these past 10 months, that's something that's been reminded to me so much is, and that I've been so thankful for, is that my dad gave me just a glimpse of what God is like and what his love is like and how much he cares for us and how thankful I am to have that as an example and something to lean on. Um, and that's a perfect example of it is there was nothing that needed to be said between me and my dad. Um, we knew we understood everything because we had said it, we had shown it to each other. And if my dad is just an example of what God is, then I need to be able to do that with him to an even greater extent. And that's really been a challenge to me over these past 10 months is just really leaning into that. And now that things are kind of back to normal, per se, of we're not going through the ringer and like we're having to go about life and not deal with the sickness and we're having to adjust and learn what life is like without dad, but not falling back into not praying as consistently, not being as bold, leaving those even small things left unsaid. And um, so, yeah, it's definitely a day-to-day journey and battle of making sure that I stay in that. But that's one of the big things that, looking back, that I took from that journey is I just need to, all the things that I wanted to do and say with my dad, I can do that and so much more with God.
You said 10 months, and I wonder, like, what is the from the on the day to day, like, what has changed? How has all of this process shifted how you approach each day? Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I think the biggest thing is doing my best to not take any day for granted, not waste any time. Um, as we were going into Christmas and birthdays and all that kind of stuff, as he was going through his battle, we were hoping that it wasn't the last, but we were approaching it as if it was because we never know. And so now it's like time is so precious. And even though we're not in that season um, of going through those battles, preparing, knowing that an end is coming at some point, we still have to have that approach every single day. Um, I'm a big one on every day my wife leaves, every time I get off the phone, anytime that there's going to be some gap, say I love you, give hugs, give a kiss, all that kind of stuff. When my mom calls, there's obviously times where I can't for whatever reason, but answer the phone. And if it's not an emergency and I have something I need to do, be like, hey, I'm going to call you right back and actually call right back. And so not just kicking things down the road and like, oh, we've got tomorrow, we've got next year or whatever. There's obviously those times where you do that and you kind of don't really have an option on that approach. But at the same time, like it's just make the most of every day, of every minute, leave nothing left unsaid, um, and just live for the moment and know that whatever we're doing, this life isn't the end, but we need to live intentionally and live for God's glory, share our story, and not be afraid to live boldly and do all those things because we never know when our time is up.
As you were talking, the word intentional just kept coming to me. So 100%. And your dad's prayer was an intentional one, right? That again, everything that he did, everything that was going through that would lead more people to Jesus. And I want to know how you, in this season, right, newly married, losing your dad 10 months ago, everything happening, bringing your mom towards you, how you are intentionally living that prayer daily, because I know you are.
Yeah. Um, the one thing that I did during that whole stretch that I haven't been as good at lately, that I've um, been getting back to in the past couple weeks, is being more consistent in being in my Bible, spending that quiet time. And it starts there, just spending that time with God, just me and Him, um, and just allowing that to affect the rest of my day and the rest of my week, and just go throughout my days knowing that people are watching, people are listening, and I'm I'm human, so I'm not perfect. There's definitely things that I say or do that afterwards I'm like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best example. Um, but knowing that if I just continue to do my best, put my best foot forward, and just trust God that He's going to give me the words um, that I need, that I'm going to do that. And that's one thing that I've been very thankful that I get from my dad, is my intentionality with my words. There's a lot of people that verbalize and process it that way. Whereas for me, I'm going to think about it, and then I'm going to give it to you, and be very intentional with what I say. Every so often, I just go off the cuff, but the majority of the time, it's very intentional. Um, Unfortunately, if it's hurting somebody or whatever, it's a lot of times can be intentional and something that I need to work on. But those words, I know how powerful they are. And I'm just glad that I got that from him, that I can just take a step back. I can think through what this person needs to hear, and allow them to hear it in a way that helps them if they're going through a hard time, or if somebody says something and it could frustrate me, like allow me to take a step back and approach it not from my frustration, but from a place of understanding and patience that God would want me to display, and um, just say it in a way that's not gonna display my frustration or anger or whatever. Um, and then actions, like knowing that everything that I do um, has a good or bad consequence. It's either going to lead people to Jesus, or it's going to lead them further away, or it's going to hurt somebody. And so just being very intentional with the things that I do, um, and the things that I say, and just even music. Like there was a stretch where, like, especially through that journey, like all I listened to was worship music, because it just kept me in that mindset, and that, like, to be grateful, and knowing how God's going to do what we need Him to do, and that He's going to provide what we need Him to provide. And so just putting myself in those places that allows me to be the best version of me for Him, and to allow people to see that. And even when I do have my mistakes, my slip ups of saying something that's not the nicest, or doing something that's like, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. Like, they see the big picture, they see me, and they know that, like, okay, that's not really him. This is the kind of person he is. And so it's not something that sticks out and turns them away from God, but allows them to see the humanness in in us and in our faith, and how it helps us on our journey.
What's a piece of advice or some guidelines that you would have for somebody that is going through what you went through, whether it be a parent, a loved one, an unexpected loss, this grief journey? What advice do you have, or how would you guide them?
For me, it all starts with prayer. Just going to God every day, being bold and asking for the things that I need and the things that I want. Just asking for that peace, asking for um, the strength to make it through the day, the strength to be able to have enough strength for me and whoever in my family needs it that day. Um, the right words to say, if it's going into that doctor's appointment, just being able to be present and hear and understand what I need to hear and understand, to ask the right questions and just know what the plan is. And um, but from there, it's hard to really anything other than just trust God, um, trust Him, have faith, and it doesn't make sense. But my faith through that whole journey, like I said, I'm 32 years old, and I've grown up in the church my whole life, and my faith was never stronger than it was in the toughest, darkest season of my life. And as I went through that, I heard a couple of people that said, I don't know how people go through this and do this without having faith. And I looked at them and I said, well, I know how they do it, but I don't know how they come out of it and can get to a place where they need to be to be able to go there. Cause I've early, in my career, I had dealt with a lot of loneliness and depression, and there were some dark times, and it took real intentionality to get out of that, and just going to God and trusting Him and growing in my faith. And if I didn't have that faith in that moment, which was far less worse than this past season that we were going through, I know how tough it would have been. So I can't even imagine how tough it is to go through what I went through without having God going before me and beside me every single day and picking me up when I needed it. Um, but really, it's just having that faith and that trust, and then just making the most of every moment. Uh, just the small things, do all those things that um, you wish you, like, if at the end you would wish you would have done, you could have done, because we're not taking any of this stuff with us. And so to me, it's make those memories and do all those things. And um, like, even for me, in my dad's last 2 days, we sat on the couch and we watched two of his favorite movies, Sandlot and Oh Brother Where Art Thou. He wasn't really paying attention. He was asleep half the time. He was a few days away from passing, but I'm going to have that memory in my head and just know, like, we got to do these things, and it's just going to bring back those memories from my childhood, and just it was truly special. Um, so just make those memories, be bold, have faith, and just live life.
At 32 years old, those are wise words, man. And for anybody that's gone through it or is going through it, I guess the word that I finish with, or that comes to me, is it's that word through. You said it multiple times, right? And because of the faith, He brings us through it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. doesn't mean it's not going to have some anger, some anguish, sadness, fear, all of it. But he always brings us through, and the ultimate through is what your dad experienced. He brought him ultimately through it and then to him.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up this journey of where we're at and to now, um, like I mentioned before we hopped on, we're moving my mom back from Indianapolis next weekend. And if you have an iPhone, you know at the top how it pops up like the random picture memories sometimes. And the other day I had one that popped up and it was me and my dad. And I clicked on it and I knew exactly what it was from, what day it was. It was his first day, his first Sunday at the church that he most recently worked at. And I coordinated with my mom. I drove over that morning and surprised him to be there with him for his first Sunday, um, because they didn't move there by choice. My dad lost his job towards the end of COVID due to budget cuts. And so it was a really tough season for him. And so I was really excited for him and proud of him. And so I just wanted to be there for him. And that picture popped up and I clicked on it and it had the date stamp at the top. June 6th, 2021. We're moving my mom back to Cincinnati, June 6th, 2026. So it was just another God wink of like, hey, I've been here the whole time and I'm going to continue to be there with you guys. And we know it's going to be an emotional day, and that obviously adds a little extra emotion to it. But it was just really cool to realize that it's going to be 5 years to the day that chapter started and ended. And we obviously wish that it wasn't ending because that would mean that the story is different. But it is, and we know that God's got a greater story and greater purpose that He's going to write because of those 5 years and because of whatever's to come after June 6th.
And the story's already been written, and that's the special thing. And he knows how it's all going to play out. And I love the God wink because those are the moments you're like, okay, God, like you're funny. Like
Yeah.
we serve a cheeky God, and I
Yeah.
love that because again, that gives you the moment to understand how much He loves you, how much He sees you, even in the frustration, the anger, the missing Him, and all that stuff. So thank you for sharing that, man. That's a really
Absolutely.
cool, almost like closure type piece for
Yeah.
all of this. Dude, if you I could just see your dad sitting and kind of chuckling through this conversation that we've had because I had intentions to go so many different places, but we literally, our conversation was exactly what his final prayer was and what the prayer was through that whole journey. And I want to recognize that with you. And I know your family will listen. Like your dad's prayer was brought to life today through our conversation. That makes me emotional because that's what we're supposed to do, man. Oh, man. Dude, thank you for sharing your story, your journey through this, your family story. And I honor you guys, and we will continue to circle you guys in prayer. And I know that this is going to impact the people that it needs to. What I'd love as we wrap this up, I'd love for you to pray us out.
Absolutely. Father God, I just thank you for today and for this time. Thank you for, what was it, 14 years ago, making mine and Steve's paths cross um, because of things that we don't even do anymore. But here we are 14 years later, still connected, still have the same purpose in life of living for you and trying to lead others to you, Lord. And um, Lord, I pray Dad's prayer that whoever listens to this, that our story, that it would do what it's supposed to do, that you would give um, people with soft hearts to be able to hear this and allow it to work in their life. Lord, I just pray for anybody that is going through a tough season, whether it's a loss of a job or just a season of financial stress, or they've lost a loved one, or they're going through some sickness, or that you would just give them a sense of peace that passes all understanding. And as somebody who's experienced that, they will know without a doubt what it is and when they get it. Um, and I just pray that you would give them strength to get through each day, each moment. And when they don't have that strength, that you would pick them up. Lord, that you would give them the comfort and just help them to make it through the days and help them to see the big picture and see your little winks to know that you're there. You're before them, you're beside them, but you're behind them, and that you will never leave us. Lord, you're so good. You are so, so good. And Lord, I can't thank you enough for all the ways that you've blessed me and my family and the ways you've given us strength and comfort through this season. And Lord, I just pray that you give that to everybody that needs it. Um, Lord, thank you again for this opportunity to share our story, to spend some time with Steve, and just pray that we would continue to live in our purpose to lead others to you. Thank you, Lord, for all the ways you love us. It's in your name I pray.
Brother, thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Dude, I love you so much.
Love you too,
And
man.
yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that, man.
Sounds good.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right.